We can't solve the abortion issue until we solve the unhealthy relationship issue. And I think a lot of times we put abortion in a box over here and we see it as an issue, as a problem in and of itself, when abortion is actually just a fruit of a deeper root. And if we never go after that, we're never going to actually change it.
You're saying that comfort is so accessible here in the United States, and that comfort leads to an apathetic spirit.
You know, discipleship really is just making a choice to be a Christ follower and submitting your life every day to the call of God on your life.
Our mission is to disciple young leaders just like you, helping you become everything God has called you to be. We're here to have authentic conversations about the real topics that our generation wrestles with, whether it's how to share the gospel, what it means to be a true disciple, or how to navigate faith in today's world. Our goal is to equip you with the tools, knowledge, and wisdom you need to lead in your generation. Join us every other week as we learn to be next-gen leaders together.
Today, we are joined by my amazing colleague, Grace Youngson of Family Policy Alliance Foundation. Grace is originally from Wales and graduated from Charis Bible College in May 2024. She currently works as a marketing specialist for Family Policy Alliance Foundation and has a deep passion for pro-life issues. So let's listen in on my conversation with Grace Youngson. Well, Grace, welcome to the 1630 podcast. We're so happy you're here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be on, and I'm honored. Thank you for having me.
Of course, we're so excited. Okay, tell us a little bit more about you and about your work with Family Policy Alliance Foundation.
Yeah, so just little heads up, I am not American, I'm British, so have a little accent going. I am 24, just turned 24, and I moved to the States as a student about 3 years ago. I studied at Charis Bible College. Before that, I studied politics for a brief period of time with Cambridge University, which was super eye-opening experience. Pretty much all my lecturers were very Marxist, and so that was really interesting. I grew up homeschooled, and so for me, when I first became passionate about this issue, I was 15 years old, and I was watching a video, and the lady in the video mentioned the word abortion. And I grew up very sheltered. I actually had no idea what abortion was at 15 years old. And so went to my mom, and I'm like, Mom, what's an abortion? And she told me, and I was just like shook to the core. I was just like, no, that cannot be real. Sorry, we're killing babies in the womb.
Yeah.
And so from that point of just initial discovery of what it was, God just kept the issue on my heart, where I just got curious. And in my last year of school, I had taken English as one of my core subjects. And so I had to write a 7,000 word research paper, which I did on abortion. And I went into the history of abortion, embryology, what abortion actually is, how abortion affects women, all the things. And at the end of completing that research paper, I was like, okay, well, actually, God was saying to me, he's like, you have a choice now, do you want to just live your little life over here, or do you want to answer the call to actually change this issue? And I was like, I know too much to just do nothing about this. And so then I came out to Charis Bible College. That was where I felt like God was drawing me to draw closer to him, to prepare for what he had called me to do. And then once I finished Charis, I started working for Family Policy Foundation. I'm a marketing specialist for them. And I love that. It's awesome. I love my team. And it's really cool to get to, be a part of an organization that's already making such a great difference and be involved in attracting more young people to them. And obviously the pro-life issue is something that I'm super passionate about as well. So I love that that's a part of the work that we do.
Yep. Yeah, but it's been so fun getting to work with you so much since we merged this summer. It's been so awesome to get to do that. But I want to pick your brain a little bit on just more of why you feel like abortion is so prevalent. I know that we've kind of had some conversations in the past about, we have all these unhealthy relationships. That's just kind of the culture, right? We have this like breakdown of the family unit. So I just want to hear more about your thoughts on that, about why this is happening.
Yeah. So I have sat down with so many girls, spoken to so many women who have had abortions, regret them. And I think one of the big things that God has shown me is exactly what you said. We can't solve the abortion issue until we solve the unhealthy relationship issue. And I think a lot of times we put abortion in a box over here and we see it as an issue, as a problem in and of itself, when abortion is actually just a fruit of a deeper root. And if we never go after that, we're never going to actually change it. And so, I absolutely love what pregnancy resource centers do. I'm connected with a bunch of them. I work with them. But at the same time, it's like we can forever be helping women in those situations, or we could actually step back a little bit more and actually ask, okay, what led you into being here in the abortion clinic, And statistically, around 87% of women say that they have been sexually harassed, felt pressured to have sex. Most young people today, and I can say this from a lot of experience, a lot of conversations as well, and statistics online will show this, but they feel like they don't know what true love is anymore. Committed relationships are something that is almost seen as a fantasy, And a lot of that also has to do with we're seeing a generation that most of which are coming from broken families. They do not have good role models. I spoke to this one girl recently and she was telling me, she's like, oh, I would love to get married and have a family one day, but I just know it doesn't work out. And I listened to her story a bit more and she started to tell me that her mom is on marriage number 6 and every single guy's been abusive. And it's like, unless we fix these mindsets that all this mess of the breakdown of family has produced, she's never going to be able to function in a healthy relationship. And she even told me, she's like, yeah, I've told my boyfriend once we start sleeping together, I'm not ready to have a baby. And she's thankfully since broken up with this guy. But it's just like the value for motherhood, the value for femininity, the value for family is nowhere in culture today. We look at the movies that young people watch, we look at the music that they listen to, and it's all just glorifying hookup culture, boss woman vibes, career's the most important thing. Like, when did you last see a movie that glorified motherhood? I can't really think of one.
Yeah.
Maybe an old one, but not now.
Yeah.
And so I think really what lies at the core is media and what media is pushing. I mean, we even look at people like Taylor Swift, who girls idolize, and she's not a mom. She's unfortunately been through a bunch of bad relationships, and if that's what girls are looking to imitate. I was talking to my boyfriend the other day and he's like, if Taylor Swift had a baby, I bet you like a bunch of girls would want a baby,
Yeah.
And it's like, if we can shift the role models in our culture, if we can start to bring this celebration of family back into media, I believe that we will see young people will start changing their views towards how they value things. And I do think, just one final thing to say, I do think that we're seeing a huge trend where hookup culture is actually dropping off now, because young people are realizing it's actually not all it's hyped up to be. It's not satisfying having sex with a bunch of different people and just feeling used. And it's not the fun that it promises. The heartbreak outweighs the fun in the moment. And so I think we're actually seeing a huge vacuum where young people are really hungry for the message that we have about true love. And so I think that this is prime time for us to be able to come in with the truth and educate them.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there's definitely been quite the cultural shift away from biblical values, right? And I think it can be so frustrating in the moment. I know I felt frustration in the moment, sometimes reading scripture and going, okay, but this isn't what I want. This isn't what feels right to me in the moment, right? And I think we have a lot of cultural shifts kind of going that direction, but then ultimately it just, like you said, leads to such despair and a lot of heartbreak that it's like, man, then you look back and it's like the Lord is actually trying to protect his people from that. He gives us good gifts like sex, but he wants to protect us and give it to us in the right context. But that can be a really hard thing to wrestle with in the moment, for sure.
Totally. And I think that a huge problem that we see in the church, I say this to my friends a lot, like, the church tells us don't have sex before marriage. I agree. But it doesn't tell you what to do with your sex drive. Like, okay,
Yep.
thanks for the rule.
Yep.
Now I have this sex drive, especially for guys
Yep.
as well. It's like, okay, what do I do with this? How do I steward this? And as well, I mean, I was with FPA, I was just producing a podcast with nurse Heidi Olson, and she talked about pornography and the downstream effects of that on, she sees so many young girls coming in injured because their boyfriend or a guy tried out something he saw in like violent porn on them, and now they're like injured. And I think, again, it just like if we never actually approach those issues and talk about them, sex is often not talked about in the church. So then when young people are curious, they go and look online, and then they're going to find porn. They're going to find all the wrong information. But in some ways, like, we can't fully blame them because we didn't give them any of the right information,
Right.
And so I think that's a huge part of it, is as the church actually steps up and actually also shares on not just like the rules of do's and don'ts, but actually has people share like real stories and actually share about, what sex truly is. And I think that's another thing, is when you make sex just casual and fun, you are actually kind of taking away people's ability to fully love, which then takes away that sacrificial family love. When people think that that is what love is, they're going to operate in a very shallow version of love and not be able to be healthy parents and healthy couples, because it's all based on just fun and in the moment. There's nothing like actually deeper. And I think that young people, as I said, I think are crying out though for the deeper. They just don't fully know it exists. And so it's so cool that we can bring that to them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, I think that the church does kind of shy away from those topics, right? And a big reason that we see so much of the fallenness in our world, I mean, obviously it's fallen anyway, but we're not being disciples and we're not making disciples, right? Like, we as the church are not doing our job to really walk with people and ourselves walk with other people so that we can have accountability and have community. And so how can we as the church really do better in that aspect and walk with people who are struggling and be open about these hard conversations like sex, like pornography? How do we have those conversations and walk with people?
I think that is such a great question. And I think you hit the nail on the head. We are not doing a good job at discipling. And really, that's what it comes back to. I actually have a group of girls who I sit down with every week and talk about healthy relationships with. And they are secular, like they're not Christian girls. And it's been really interesting for me because first week I sat down with them, I realized like, whoa, okay, your minds are really set in what you believe right now. And this is not going to be something where I can just flick the switch and tell you you're wrong and tell you what's the truth. And you're just going to flip your mindset and agree with everything. I realized like, wow, this is a discipleship journey. And that means oftentimes as Christians, and God has really taught me this, we go into ministry, into discipleship even, thinking like, okay, I've got my checklist, you're my project, let me check off that I changed your mind on this and I changed your mind on this, and let me kind of like feel good that I'm being productive, I'm seeing results, which obviously we want to see results, but it has to be motivated by love. And that would be my first thing. Whenever you are going into a conversation like that with someone, if you're coming at it from I am holier than thou, condescending kind of tone, you are not going to have a fruitful conversation with that person. Yep. But if you come at it from actually a heart of love and actually like, I care about you, you're not just my ministry project, I actually love you and I want to love you as God loves you. And then the second part of that is you have to be able to be honest and vulnerable. If you can't be real with them, how can you expect them to be real with you? And I think for me, growing up in an amazing Christian home, super sheltered, this was something that I struggled with a little bit at the beginning, because when I first found out what abortion was, I was like, how could anyone do such a thing? And then God took me on such a journey of honestly showing me my weaknesses and being like, Grace, you're no better than any of these women.
Mm,
You have been extremely privileged to grow up in such an amazing home, two married, loving parents, good identity, never really had anything crazy traumatic happen. And then I hear stories of these girls who have witnessed abuse, been abused, whatever that looks like, mums on marriage number 6, and I'm like, okay, if I grew up in all of that pain, I probably would be exactly where you're at.
mhm,
And a lot of Christians wouldn't want to admit that because it's like, I'm admitting that I'm like sinful or something. And, God showed me, he's like, I was asking him, I'm like, Lord, how did you do ministry? And he showed me, he's like, I went and I ate with the sinners and I
mm,
sat with them. And I guarantee you, Jesus did not come in and was like, I'm like super holy, holy Jesus is here, I'm better than you all. No, he went and he identified with them. He sat with them. He actually lowered himself because in that culture back in Jesus's time, it was a big deal who you ate with. It was a sign of respect. It was a sign of friendship. And so for Jesus to go and eat with the sinners, the cast-offs of society was a huge deal. And so I think when it comes to discipleship, we have to go in with honesty. We have to go in with vulnerability. And whenever I'm discipling a girl, a young woman, and she's telling me things about her life, I will always try and find a way that I can relate. And I may not be able to relate to a lot of things, but let's say she's telling me that she's on antidepressant meds and she's depressed and she's struggling with that. I have never really experienced depression, but when I was younger, I used to have panic attacks. And so like I will relate in whatever
yeah,
capacity I can and say, hey, I know what it's like to some extent to feel this overwhelm of emotion. What do you do with it? You're just like, yeah, you're in a box. You don't know what to do with all this emotion. And then I will share about how God transformed my life and set me free from all the fear that was really the root of those panic
mm,
attacks. And so then that also opens the door to share about the Lord in a way that isn't just like, okay, let me get you saved and tell you that Jesus died on the cross for you and he loves you. I think Jesus always gave people practical things. Like he went and healed so many people. There was a very practical element to his ministry. And I think sometimes in the church, we emphasize like faith, hope, love. Of course, all of those are super important. But unless we actually show the actions of those, they're not real to the
mhm,
world. They just end up being these spiritual ideas or fantasies or something. And so I think when you're sitting down and you're discipling someone, the other thing to realize is when you're sharing about marriage and family values, you are sharing God. You don't have to get that person saved in that moment to have done something godly. Even when you're, sharing with them and inspiring them towards motherhood, towards family, that's God's idea. That is not the world's idea. The world does not have a concept of that. That is God's idea. And so even just realizing being that influence in that space is being a piece of God's heart to that person. You don't
mm,
have to have them, saved for it to be a successful ministry time. And
yeah,
so that's really what I would say. Go in with love, be as relatable and as vulnerable and as honest as possible. And that takes some time to work on that in your heart because sometimes some of us are still healing from some things. You're not ready to tell someone that. That's okay. Like, don't tell them something just for the sake of being vulnerable when you're not ready to share that. But also, try and get yourself ready to share that
mm,
because testimonies and vulnerability are such a huge door opener to relate to people and open up their hearts and be genuine, be authentic in who you are as a person. So
mhm,
that's what I
mhm.
would say about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you mentioned kind of identity as well in there too. And
Mhm.
so I want to touch on that a little bit because, and that kind of goes along with the discipleship aspect as well, because really, if you're not discipled at a young age, our identity is formed as just little people, right? Like we learn
Yeah.
that so fast and it affects you the rest of your life for better or for worse. And but as disciples, that usually starts in the home with parents. But like you said, some people, a lot of people, don't have parents who disciple them, and hopefully that comes later on in life.
Mhm.
But what is this connection to identity with the pro-life movement, with abortion? What is our connection between the identity and purpose and that, or is there a connection, do you think?
Oh, I think there is a huge connection. I think that really identity lies at the root of relationships, because how you see yourself will then dictate what you tolerate from other people and the way you act towards other people. And so, I think, the obvious thing to say is also when you have an unhealthy self-worth, you will sort of allow abuse because you just think that, maybe you've been abused in the past, and abuse isn't just something that happens to you physically. Maybe it's has such huge mental implications where it's like, when someone just uses you in a way, now in your mind it's like, okay, I am just something to be used. And so if we never overcome those identities, those false identities, we're forever going to repeat cycles of being in the wrong relationships. And I mean, even for me, I don't have like a story of abuse or anything, but even growing up in an amazing Christian home, there were still insecurities that I had growing up, and that even like I can see, back when I was younger, I ended up in a bit of a situationship for a little bit because I didn't really know my value as well as I should have done. And it's so interesting because at the time, like, everyone would be like, oh, Grace is such a confident person. She's like a boss woman. She's going after things. Like, she's in relationship with God. And yes, I was all of those things. But I also there were just some insecurities that I struggled with, which then like opened the door to being more vulnerable to a bad relationship. And so I think, you know, as I said right at the beginning, unhealthy relationships are at the root of abortion. And so if we want to solve those, it really comes back to identity. And we look at so many things today. I mean, porn, just lots of things online. It really sexualizes women, where you find your identity maybe in your appearance. Or if it's the boss woman culture, you're finding your identity in achievements. And those things are not constant. They're not steady. One day you're going to fail on a test, or one day you're going to wake up and just feel ugly that day. And if you're letting that dictate your value and your identity, you're going to settle for not great things along the course because you're like, oh, well, I'm not great today, so I don't deserve anything great. And the beauty about Jesus and what God tells us about ourselves is that our identity and our value is found in Him. And that is something that never changes. That's the only place that we can really find security and that sure sense of value. It's never changing. It's not something that's based on your emotions. And that can be hard sometimes when you feel like you've messed up, you've failed. We all do. And then God is telling you, hey, but I still love you. I still see you as a success. I don't see you as a failure. We actually have to be able to accept what He's saying. And it's like a relationship. It is a relationship. You may have the most loving guy in the world, and if you can't receive his love, that's never going to work. But it's not that he isn't giving love, he isn't loving, like he's giving all of that. And then you will function according to how much you receive that. And it's the same with God. Like, He is giving us so much love, so much purpose. He's giving us this beautiful sense of identity, and we do have to take it. It's not automatic. And that means dying to self, dying to what your brain is saying sometimes, because our brains love to tell us, well, really, the devil loves to get in our brains and tell us, you're not good enough, you messed up. And when you read the Bible is full of everyone's mess ups. There is like not a perfect person apart from Jesus in the Bible. And it's so amazing to me, just how in some ways honest and open the Bible is. Like one of
Oh,
my
it is. Yeah.
favorite books, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
one of my favorite books is probably Psalms. And it's amazing to me, David's story as well. I love Psalms because it shows his intimate relationship with the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Everything he writes is about the Lord being his strength and the Lord surrounding him with love. And really it comes back to how much will you believe you're loved? Like
Mm.
all the love is there,
Yeah.
all the grace is there. So I think identity, it lies at the core, and we have to be able to share with young girls the truth of their identity. And that also comes into the conversation of sometimes the church can like shame women who end up, in an
Yep.
unplanned pregnancy, out of
Yep.
wedlock or whatever it is. And that is not God's heart. God's
Mm.
heart is one of love, one of forgiveness, and one of help. These girls are crying out for
Mm-hmm.
help. And I, it's so sad when I hear some stories of girls who have come to their church about being pregnant, and then their church has told them, okay, you're out because you did this thing. And it's like, oh my goodness, that is not God's heart. God's heart is come to me, run to me when you're in trouble, and I'm going to help you. Like I am the God of forgiveness and restoration. And so we have to have that same attitude as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so good. Okay, I'm going to shift gears slightly because I want to ask you a couple kind of more policy related questions with all of
All
this.
right.
First of all, one of the arguments that we hear a lot for abortion is that it's healthcare. So is it healthcare?
Absolutely not. Abortion, healthcare is supposed to help people. And I mean, you look at the Hippocratic Oath and it's all about you will do no harm to the patient. And I mean, first of all, obviously, it is doing a big harm to one patient or actually killing one patient. So that is not healthcare. But secondly, it doesn't even do what it says on the can or the tin. It doesn't even help women. And we see this. There was a study done not too long ago. I can give you the link to it if you want to link to it in the notes.
Mm-hmm.
But a PhD doctor did a study about the effects of abortion on women. And she found that women are over 150% more likely to have suicidal ideations following on from an abortion. She found that drug use, mental health problems, all these things just skyrocket after an abortion. And what's so interesting is most abortions are procured on the grounds of my mental health is bad, I cannot deal with being a mother, so I therefore need an abortion. And then what is not told to women is abortion is sold as this quick fix and okay, we'll just take care of it and now you can continue on with your life. That is not true. You cannot continue on with your life as per usual after that happening. And it's so sad that so many women are not fully informed of that fact. I have personal friends, two women in particular. Both of them have like almost identical stories or very similar. They're both like in their 50s. And when they were both like 18 and 21, they each had two abortions. And basically, they completely bought the lie that, okay, this is nothing. And then what happened was, the one of them, she went on to live her life and could never hold down a healthy relationship, went through a couple divorces, never had kids, and just really sad. And she never ever linked that inability to have good relationships to abortion until a few years ago when she came to the Lord and he actually showed her that that was where the root was. And I find it so sad that her whole life was derailed and
Mm.
she was completely ill informed and she didn't even think that's what was the root. And then the other lady, she, after having a couple of abortions, she then went into just severe depression. She never even got married. She couldn't hold down a relationship. She hated herself and she didn't understand why. She just thought, oh, I'm just the depressed type. And same thing, she came to the Lord a few years ago and God showed her that was what was at the root. And now that she's dealt with that, she's finally free from that depression. But what a huge disservice to women.
Mm-hmm.
That is not healthcare. That made them so much worse and basically stole a huge portion of their life, their childbearing years, their years to like be married and like have kids. And I just find that so sad. And actually, for me, my passion for this issue in many ways stems a lot from the woman's side um, of just how it completely destroys women.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is not healthcare, you know, and I mean, what's so interesting to me as well, I don't know if this is one of your questions. I can't remember what I saw, but in terms of having a conversation with someone about this issue, I have found talking with young women about this that it's far more fruitful to approach it from the woman's side. So these college girls, which I mentioned before, we actually had a conversation about abortion one week, and they started off by telling me, yeah, we're pro-choice. It's just a fetus. It doesn't matter. You know, if I was to get pregnant today, I am not ready for that, you know. And so I listened, and then I started coming at it. I asked them, I'm like, well, you know, what do you think about the effects that abortion has on women, which women are not told? And immediately they're all like, oh my gosh, it's horrific. I know friends who have been through this, and they're so messed up from it now. And so then we start along the conversation of, do you actually think this is good for women? Some women will sort of argue, oh, I believe it is. I agree that it is bad, but it's like a necessary evil. And then when you actually get into it, you know, these girls, by the end of the conversation, they're like, wow, okay, maybe I'm not as pro-choice as I thought. Like, I totally agree with you that this doesn't really help women and would be something that should not be gone about lightly in any way. And the one girl who had said at the beginning, like, I would get an abortion if I got pregnant right now, sleeping with my boyfriend, she then said at the end, she's like, you know what? I would keep the baby. And it's so interesting. Sometimes we think that the only way to have a conversation around abortion is just to hone in on the baby. And actually, when you talk about the woman's side, a lot of people's hearts open up more to that. And I think part of the reason is, unfortunately, we don't really have an emotional connection to an unborn baby, but everyone has an emotional connection to a woman in their life. And everyone has seen a woman in their life, even if it's not a result of abortion, but go through mental hardship or whatever that is, and seen that like face to face. And so I think when we actually come at it from that side, it's really, really powerful. And so, yeah, abortion is the furthest thing from healthcare. It is so unnecessary. You know, as women, we're made to be moms. Like, we can do this. God made us to do this. Yes, I'm not discarding by any means that it's going to be hard if you're a single mom. But there are also so many resources out there, and there is also adoption. If you don't want to, you know, be a mother to that child, you can give birth. And there are so many people in America waiting to adopt right now. There's like not enough babies for adoption. And so you can still give that child that chance at life, which is also a beautiful thing. And I think sometimes adoption has a little bit of almost stigma around it that it shouldn't have. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my sister is adopted, so I am very pro adoption. It is a really beautiful thing. My parents actually wanted to do that even before I was born. I was the surprise and she was the chosen one. So there you are. It happens that way sometimes. Yes. But another issue I wanted to ask you about is that I've heard both Christians and non-Christians argue this, that we need more of a holistic view, is kind of how they put it. Is that, okay, yes, we like care about these children, we want them to be born, but then we're just kind of hands off after that, because then the policies that we enact may not help them as much. That's the argument, after they're born, right? That we're not really caring for them afterward. So what's kind of your response to that? And maybe how do we do better in that space? How do we make more legislation and policies and have these agencies make decisions that really do help these families thrive?
Yeah, I can definitely see people's point in that, although it's not entirely true. What's so interesting is, you know, the pro-choice side would like to say that they're pro-choice, but the only choice that they really do anything about is the abortion side. Every single pregnancy center that offers mother resources is pro-life in heart. And so actually it's like totally false to say that the pro-life movement does nothing to help women and mothers further down the line, because we do more than the pro-choice side. But I do think that we can still do more as well. I definitely think that there is still more to be done. And I think even churches can play a better role in that. I have visited churches. I was in one church in California, and at the end of the service, this young girl comes up to me. She's 16. She's pregnant. She's crying her eyes out. She just discovered, and she doesn't know what to do. And what was so interesting to me, I was just visiting this church. I don't live in California. And she told me, she's like, yeah, I was too scared to tell anyone in my church about this. And what's so interesting is this church is actually a very, very politically active, super pro-life church. The pastor talks about it, but yet you have this girl sitting in the audience who doesn't really know where to go for help. And she started asking me, she's like, where do I go for help? And I'm like, well, I will get you linked up to your local pro-life pregnancy center. And she's like, the only pregnancy center I know is Planned Parenthood. And I'm like, you're sitting in church, you should know where your resources are, you know? And I think a lot of pastors may not want to share that because they don't want to admit that people in their church need that. But what is crazy is it is just as much of an issue in the church as it is in the world. 50% of women who are seeking abortions are actively attending church, and over 80% would identify as Christian.
Wow.
And so we have a huge job in the church to do a better job at making sure that women find the support that they need. And so I think there is a lot of space for a lot more to be done. I think that from a policy standpoint, even, you know, I think there can be more policies enacted for women in college to give them more help and support being a mom in college, because a lot of times there is just a huge lack of support there. And the other side of it is that there are things out there that do support single moms, grants, different things, but they're just not, there's not as much awareness as there should be. And so I think from the pro-life side, we can definitely do more to raise more awareness and make sure that women know about the help available to them. So yeah, I think that it's not entirely true to throw that at the pro-life side. We definitely do far more than the other side. However, there's always more that we can do, and that's God's heart, is to really walk alongside. And I do think that the holistic approach is part of God's heart. God's heart is not just, let me check off that you kept the baby and now go do it yourself. Like, no, you know, and we have so much wisdom in the church, you know, older women who have parented. And actually what I have found is a lot of older women really want to pour into young women. They just don't have like an outlet to do it. And so as we're able to make those connections and things, I think we have everything we need resource wise. We just need to start making those connections and getting out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you explain a little bit what a pregnancy center does?
Yes.
We'd just love to hear a little bit about that. And then I know you've talked about, you know, visiting with some women who are in these situations. What are kind of some first steps along with the pregnancy center that you would recommend if someone is considering that?
Yeah, absolutely. So pregnancy resource centers are amazing. They really are the hands and feet of the pro-life movement. They are dealing with these women on a daily basis and serving them and loving them. Every pregnancy center doesn't offer all the same services, but most pregnancy centers will offer pregnancy test, ultrasound. Many of them have started offering STI testing now. And then a lot of them, once you go in for that initial ultrasound, they will have programs where if you choose to keep the baby, you can go through parenthood classes and actually get like free baby items, whether that's like clothing, a buggy. I don't know what Americans call it.
Stroller.
You guys say stroller. Um, whatever it is, a car seat. I was gonna say pushchair at first. That's what I
So
grew up
close.
calling it. And
Okay.
anyway, it's so funny because it's like we have the same language, but there's
But
a
also
lot of
not.
different
Yeah.
words. I've made a couple of, well, I mean, I wouldn't say boo-boos. Like I've just said some words and Americans have looked at me like, what the
What is
heck is that? So it's kind of funny. But yeah, pregnancy centers are amazing. And really, most of their hearts at pregnancy centers is to serve the woman beyond birth. They want to, help her with parenting classes, help her with resources for her baby, whether that's like diapers and formula and all this stuff. And so they really are amazing. And as a woman, if anyone's listening to this who is considering abortion, the first thing that you should definitely do is get an ultrasound to check out, the state of the pregnancy. Because if you try to take an abortion pill with an ectopic pregnancy, that could be life-threatening. And so, and I mean, you also want to fully confirm that you are pregnant and how far along you are, because it's really dangerous to take an abortion pill beyond a certain amount of time. And, maybe you misjudged how far along you are in your pregnancy. These kinds of things often go overlooked by the other side, where it's just like, let me just send you an abortion pill by mail, do this whole thing yourself, which is really dangerous without any medical supervision. And so I would advise, and from a mental standpoint, I don't fully get, but I have put myself in the shoes. I've tried to really imagine what it would be like to be in that moment of pregnancy scare. And, I've spoken to so many women as well, sharing their experiences with me. And to an extent, I get the fear that you're feeling in that moment. Like, what the heck was I thinking? My life as I had planned it now seems to be over. And especially if the guy in the relationship is not wanting to stay with you, or is threatening, unless you have an abortion, I'm going to leave you. I get how that is huge. And that is not a light thing to just be like, to brush over, but decision made out of fear, one rash decision and another rash decision are not going to produce good, peaceful future. And so I would encourage you to just step back, calm your mind. You do not have to make this decision in a rush. You have some time to actually see what you want. And I think that most of us will find that we actually want to have the child, because when you actually step back and you block out some of those voices in culture that are telling you it's all about you achieving things. And I mean, that does not even bear joy. When I was growing up, I I can relate to not wanting to be a mom as the top of my list. Like, I grew up very, very achievement oriented. A lot of people would have categorized me as like the boss woman, career focused. If I was not doing like schoolwork, I was doing ballet, piano, swimming. I was competing in stuff. I was going after medals and prizes and good grades, and I'm super grateful that for all the self-discipline and character building that taught me. I don't regret some of that. I'm glad I kept busy. I'm glad I kept out of trouble. But at the same time, I started to develop this identity that was founded in my achievements. And then I found it very hard. And this was kind of what lied at the root of having panic attacks when I was younger. Found it very hard when I didn't achieve, because I was like, now I'm worthless because my worth is based in my achievements. And this comes back to the whole boss woman culture and everything. And what I also discovered was like, those achievements did not give me the kick that I was hoping for out of them. And if you think that sacrificing this baby for these achievements that you want to go after in the future is going to bring you more joy, am quite confident to say that it will not. Now I'm in such a space where I'm like, actually, I've gone down the achievement route. I've gone down whatever, trying to find joy in these things. And first of all, my joy is found in the Lord. But what would be the most special thing that could happen in my life is definitely to be a mom. And that's coming from someone who like grew up being like, it's not that I didn't want to be a mom. It was just that I didn't value it as much. And then I started working with kids and I was like, whoa, these are like, kids are the best. And I realized there was a space in my heart that I had never fully known of myself before. I was like, whoa, actually, I have like strong maternal instincts and I like love kids. And I think many of us as women growing up in the culture we have actually never tapped into that side of ourselves yet. And so in that moment, I would encourage you to be open to discovering that side of yourself. There's so many famous women, actors, sports players. I was reading a blog the other day with just quotes from a bunch of famous women saying that even everything they've accomplished in their careers, nothing matches being a mom. And being a mom actually has given them more energy to be successful in their careers because they now have this child who they want to work hard for, who they want to make proud, of them. I remember I love Wimbledon, which is tennis game in the UK. It's the only like sport that I watch and I really get into it. And I remember, I think it was last year's or the year before, I was watching a player. Her last name's Svitolina. I think it's Alina Svitolina. Anyway, she was playing, and the commentator is like, "Oh, she's playing so well. She gave birth like 2 or 3 months ago." And I was like, "What?"
Wow.
So then I looked her up. And there was like a whole blog on her, and she was saying, I've never played my best tennis until being a mom. And she did really, really well in Wimbledon that year. And I think, we think as women, our life is going to be over. We're not going to be able to achieve anything. We believe all these lies. And actually, what if your life was just beginning? What if this baby was maybe what you needed to help get you onto that path of having something to be responsible to? And so I would just encourage you, take time. Don't rush at this decision. Don't let it be guided by fear. Take some time to really discover who you are as a person and what desires you have in your heart. And also be careful who you talk to. Talk to people who love you. Who you talk to is so huge because they can influence and will influence the decision that you make. And some people may just be that other voice of fear where it's just like, oh my gosh, you need to get an abortion because yes, your life is going to be over and blah, blah, blah. So seek out those people who are not just pushing you towards that, and find, if you are choosing life, which I would really encourage you to do so, find your tribe who's going to support you in that, especially if your significant other is not going to be in the picture anymore. Find those people around you. And if you are struggling, there are so many resources online. Pregnancy centers will help you. Another amazing resource is, I don't know if I'm actually allowed to say resources on this or not, but I'll ask Abby and maybe we'll link it down below afterwards. But there are some amazing resources out there. So just don't be afraid of asking for help. Don't be afraid of reaching out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for someone who is passionate about this issue, who wants to get involved, just like you've gotten involved, whether that could be advocacy, right, for legislation, maybe at your state capitol, that could be volunteering at your pregnancy center, your local one. It could just be donating items. What are kind of just a few options, and how would you recommend somebody start to get involved?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the first thing is to ask yourself what area you're passionate about, because sometimes we can feel pressured to kind of be active in every single area. And I do think that God has given us grace for specific areas. Some people are really called to the policy side. Some people are really called to the nurturing side of helping the women and volunteering at pregnancy center. So, I would first of all ask God, what has he placed in your heart? and what giftings has he given you in those areas? And then Google, how you can help. If it's a pregnancy center, Google your local pregnancy center. Most of them are willing and ready to accept all volunteers. They need volunteers. And the other thing I would say is don't be afraid to think outside the box either. For me, you know, yes, there's policy, there's helping at pregnancy resource centers, but I believe that God also wants to show us things that are not being done yet to solve this issue. And so maybe that's something in your heart is like, God, show me something that isn't being done, and yeah, be open to what he says and go for it. That's the biggest thing I would say. Whatever you feel called to do, go for it. Do not allow yourself to get comfortable. I think, just a little side note, as a British person coming to America, something that I have witnessed as I compare the two cultures is there exists a lot of like consumerism in America. People spend a lot more money on a lot more things. And I mean, hey, us British people over here, we spend money too, but there is this just idea that happiness is linked to possessions and that you just need to can all you can get and sit on the can kind of thing. Like that is how the American dream has almost morphed into, which is not how it began at all. But I think breaking out of that, just being comfortable and actually recognizing that we actually have a duty to do something. God is calling every single one of us to play a role in this, whatever that looks like. And, that could also look like maybe you have a great business mind and you can fundraise for pregnancy centers. It doesn't have to be that you're necessarily doing the hands-on volunteering or marching at your capital. And that's what I mean by ask God what he's put inside of you. And whatever platforms of influence you have, use them for this. Maybe you run a podcast or something, bring someone on to talk about this, enlighten your listeners. Maybe you run a coffee shop, make sure you have flyers with resources for the local pregnancy center in there. Maybe whatever it is that you do, ask God how he can use that in this area and surrender that to him. And then go for it. Be obedient and surrender the consequences and the results to him. Remember that it's about obedience to him first before the results that are coming. Sometimes we can get a little discouraged, and I totally relate to this when it's like you're doing what you feel like God is saying, you're not seeing all the results you want to see, and you have to remember that our role is obedience. Our role is relationship with God, being obedient to him, and he is the one who brings the results. And also, there are so many things happening and going on that you don't even know. You may have spoken somewhere and there was someone sitting in the audience considering abortion and decided not to, but didn't come up and tell you afterwards. You have no idea the full impact of what you're doing. And so, just be joyful in the Lord, be obedient to him. There are so many resources out there. I mean, through 1630 and Family Policy Alliance, on the Family Policy Alliance website, we have After Row. And if you go on there, you can actually take a quiz, which will ask you exactly what I said, like, what do you feel called to? Which state are you in? And then we'll recommend how you can make a difference based on that. So that is an incredible resource to get started. And just submit your heart to the Lord. And I think just one other real quick thing I will say, for me, when I first discovered this issue, I was shocked, I was saddened, but I would watch different pro-life things. There's something called the silent scream, which is very, very difficult to watch. I think every person should try and watch it if they can. It is hard. It's basically showing you an abortion. But I watched it when I was younger, and I remember like being very sad, but I didn't cry. And I showed my mom, and like 2 minutes into it, she's like crying her eyes out. And I was like, God, like, what is wrong with me? Why am I like not so emotional over this. And two things that I did following on from that. One thing God showed me, he's like, Grace, I have graced you for this, where there is a certain like toughness about you. Because imagine if I was called to this and all I did was cry every day. I'm not going to get very much done, you know? But the other side was, I was like, God, I want your heart. I want you to break my heart for what breaks yours. And I started just really reading things that were about the love of God and just challenging my heart on them. And so if you don't feel as passionate, like ask God to open up your heart and speak to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like you said, God has called all of us to do something, right? And that could be, there's a wide range of things that you can do. But we do want all of our 1630 people to be active. And we know Gen Z is super active. They love getting involved. They love being in the space. So yeah, I would just encourage you, if you need direction, that's what we're here for. So yeah. Well, just any kind of final thoughts before we close out?
I mean, my only final thought would be, if God is showing you something to do, do it. None of us are qualified. None of us are ready. Obviously there is like a time of preparation, but even I have spoken to so many young leaders and everyone agrees, like, no, I did not feel 100% ready going into this, you know, but you go for it nevertheless. And so I would just encourage you, whatever you feel like God is putting on your heart, go for it. And, you know, God cannot steer a stationary ship. If you make a mistake, you go for something you shouldn't have done, you are moving and God can steer you in the other direction. But if you're just sitting there, God can like not do anything with that. So I would encourage you, do it, go for it, be obedient to the Lord, and just see what he will do. He is so faithful. He is so good. And even that journey, even if, you know, not everything goes perfectly, the way that you will grow in your relationship with God is worth so much. The way that it will prepare you for the future is worth so much. Don't take failure so seriously. Remember that, you know, this life is about relationship with God first and foremost. And so seek to go after that and just say yes to the Lord. It'll be an adventure. It'll be amazing. So yeah. Thank you so much for having me on, Abby.
Of course, yes. I'm so glad that you got to be here and hear your insight and hear your passion on this issue. It was just really awesome to get to talk to you about it. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, of course. It was my pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us today for my conversation with Grace Youngson on supporting mothers who choose life, how the church can help struggling women and families, and why being pro-life is so vital for our nation's future. Thank you for letting us be a part of your life as you become all that God has called you to be. Be sure to like, subscribe, download our episodes, and share them with a friend. You can follow us on social media at CE_1630 to see what we're up to, and check out our website, ce1630.org, to learn more about our programs, including our Washington, D.C. trip, free classes, and more. 1630 is an initiative of Christians Engaged, a ministry of Family Policy Alliance Foundation. Please consider supporting the ministry at ce1630.org or christiansengaged.org. Your support empowers this work so we can continue making episodes just like this. We'll see you next time.